Morning, everybody. Exciting chapter of Balloon Boy coming up in just a minute. Two fast things. I want to remind you, you do have an assignment over spring break, and that is to do a life skill project. Learn a life skill. And suggestions I had made were this, but it doesn't have to stick to this. We're going to talk about it at tomorrow's Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. I've been making sure that every family checks the Constella, and those that don't, I've been connecting to parents so everyone gets the word. This is a picture. Sorry. This is a picture of Van Tassel's daughter over Los Angeles in 1888. I don't know if you can see, the person right there is kind of small. Reddy Gates's balloon was 40 feet. If you do some estimating, it's like this one is kind of like almost 40 feet high. But I think Reddy Gates's balloon was a little bit bigger than that. But it looked really like that. It had the netting, the small interior where they forced hot air. It was canvas. Van Tassel's daughter would rise really high in this balloon, like into the clouds. And she would do trapeze stuff on the way, and then she would parachute down. And it was an act that people paid a lot to see. They were successful for a while, and then one of the daughters died tragically while performing in Bangladesh. Interesting story. So let's jump right in. Chapter 15. Reddy is in the balloon, and he is floating. In the balloon. Floating. Though he couldn't actually feel the balloon moving, Reddy could tell he was rapidly rising. Fear clawed at the pit of his stomach. He felt dizzy and cold. He closed his eyes and he hung on really tight. Like before in the engine room, the only prayer that came to his mind was, "Deliver us from evil." He whispered those words fiercely now. "Deliver us from evil. Deliver us from evil." He opened his eyes. He didn't seem to be rising any more for the moment. He forced himself to breathe slowly and calmly, in and out. Oh my God, Reddy Gates using the breathing tool because he's like 1,000 feet in the air. 1,000 feet, let's get some perspective. 1,000 feet is pretty tall. Suddenly the balloon spun around quickly, almost having Reddy fall off. His heart yammered as he squeezed his legs tight around the wooden plank, and he clung tight to the ropes. He felt sick to his stomach now. Things settled down, and he was drifting eastward. Despite his fear, Reddy marveled at the amazing panorama below. To west, San Francisco Bay looked like a pond filled with toy boats. He saw Goat Island, Angel Island, and Alcatraz. Goat Island is, I think, I don't know what Goat Island is. We'll look it up. Beyond the bay, in the city itself, he picked out Telegraph Hill and Long Wharf. He saw a tiny vessel entering the bay. Side-wheel steamer. Here he was, the first to spot the mail ship. But what good did it do him now? Across the Golden Gate, the cluster of boats and waterfront buildings had to be Sausalito. And far to the north, what was that mountain? Was that Shasta? Reddy pondered his predicament. How long would this thing stay up? Would he float for days? What if the wind blew him out to sea? What if the balloon hurled him to the depths below? Would he see his family again? Tears strung his eyes as he pictured his loved ones, father still bedridden, mother working hard all day, reading her Bible at night. What her prayers say to him now? And Lydia, all too soon to be married Lydia. He thought he was her rescuer. Now he couldn't even save himself. He studied the yellow silk monster above him. The neck of the balloon pointed straight down. So his balloon was not canvas, it was silk. It's a lot of silk. The neck of the balloon pointed straight down, wide open. Shouldn't have the men tied it closed to keep the gas from escaping? No, gas was lighter than air. It wouldn't leak out an opening at the bottom of the balloon, but what about the one at the side or the top? He felt for a penknife in his pocket. Could he climb up and poke a hole in the balloon? If he did, would the gas rush out, dropping him from the sky? A small tear might let it out slowly. But could he get high enough to make a useful hole? He looked at the balloon and its ropes. Could he climb up, squeeze himself between the netting? A voice from below startled him. "Hello, balloon!" Reddy peered at the landscape, trying to see who called out. Was it a Sunday hiker? He was passing over Mount Diablo, a peak he had often spotted from his steamboat when he went to Sacramento. It was only a blurred mass below. He waved anyway, grateful for the brief human contact. The wind shifted, pushing him northwesterly. So I guess, you can't hear somebody from 1,000 feet. So I guess when he went by Mount Diablo, because the mountain was up, and he was on the same trajectory, somebody was closer to him and close enough to yell. The wind shifted, and it pushed him northwestern. Shivering from both anxiety and the cold, he took his bearings again. He could see the Sacramento River. He floated high above Martinez, the new town of Martinez. He saw people in the streets. They looked like ants. A steamboat at the wharf. Did anyone notice him? Across the channel from Martinez was Benicia, the state capital. And Benicia was the state capital at the time. And it was a new state. Boats plied the Sacramento River. Much further east were the towering peaks of the Sierra Nevada off in the distance. The balloon continued to climb higher and headed north over the marshes of Suisun Bay. The loftier height was both exhilarating and frightening. What would happen if it went too high? What if he kept going north into a very unpopulated territory? Even if he landed safely, he might get eaten by a grizzly bear. The time had come for action. He opened his knife and he placed it in his teeth. He raised himself to crouch on the plank. So far, so good. Balloon steady. Slowly, he slid his hands up the ropes, trying to reach the netting. But the thin cords, only a quarter-inch wide, cut at his hands whenever he tested his weight against them. How could he hoist himself up and climb it? After struggling with the ropes for several minutes, he gave up on this plan. The cords were just too thin. He lowered himself back to a sitting position and put away his knife. He licked the rope burn on his hand and just contemplated his next move. As he gazed at the rolling plains beneath him and the hills beyond, he realized he had run out of familiar landmarks. He spotted a farmhouse, the only building for miles around. Reddy started shivering uncontrollably. His feet felt like ice. How could he get warm? He had a kerchief around his neck. Would that help? He removed his right shoe, and he tied the kerchief around his foot and ankle and put his shoe back on. It helped a little. As he wondered how to warm up his other foot, the balloon began to spin again rapidly. He clutched the ropes desperately, and he felt dizzy and nauseous. He must have hit cross currents of air. Finally, despite his queasiness, he opened his eyes again, and the ground below was closer than before. Looking up, he saw the balloon twisting around inside the netting, probably from the spinning. The neck opening, previously pointed downward, had migrated to the side. It was releasing gas. The balloon was losing altitude, and he was headed back down to Earth. Reddy anxiously watched the Earth rush closer and closer. Was this too fast? Could he do anything to break his fall? Would he crash and die in this desolate area? "Deliver us from evil, deliver us from evil," he prayed again. He opened his eyes. The balloon had reached a point 15 feet above the ground, and it stopped, momentarily motionless. Not wanting to shoot back up into the sky, Reddy prepared to jump. But suddenly the balloon dropped like a rock. He landed hard on his right ankle and found himself being dragged along the ground in a tangle of ropes. Afraid the wind might lift him into the air again, he seized his knife, and he frantically sawed at the cords. Twigs and rocks scraped at him as he bounced through the scrubby vegetation. He managed to cut one rope, then another. The balloon continued to tow Reddy on a horizontal journey across the hillside. Finally, a third line gave away, and the balloon tumbled free from the balloon's clutches, and the balloon drifted up much lighter once more. Balloon, good riddance. I'm sorry, the sun now coming up. There we go. Balloon, good riddance. Overwhelmed and exhausted, he lay on the ground shaking and sobbing. As the late afternoon sun gently warmed him, the numbness gradually left his hands and feet. Wiping his eyes on his sleeve, he took stock of his situation. His ankle was hurt, but he was able to walk on it. He had cuts and scrapes and rope burns. His left knee showed a gash through his trousers, but he had survived. He had survived his voyage remarkably well. But now what? From the sun, he figured it was 6 o'clock. He had been airborne more than 2 hours. He ran his tongue around his mouth. Too bad he didn't have an orange. Well, no use staying here. Where was that farmhouse he spotted earlier? It was south. He remembered that. He started walking. Could he find the house before nightfall? He climbed a hill to look around. All around him he saw only rolling fields of wild oats. No roads, no fences, no buildings. He headed south. Even if he missed the farmhouse, he would hit the bay eventually. As he walked, he thought again of his family. Surely Max would go straight to Reddy's parents. They'd all think he was dead. It hurt to imagine how his parents must be feeling right now. 1 hour later, Reddy saw a cultivated farmland. He quickened his pace. He saw a small square on the horizon, barely noticeable as the sun went down. Despite his tender ankle, he broke into a run. A gray-haired woman in a calico dress answered his knock and looked at him most curiously. Right, that's the end of chapter 15. There's 2 more chapters and some pretty interesting conclusion stuff goes on. So we are going to persevere. A video tomorrow and a video Friday, even though it's vacation day, because these videos take way too long to upload. This one takes like an hour, 2 hours to upload to YouTube as it is. And then there's some postscript. You might notice the quality hasn't been as good in the last couple of days. My Apple computer died, and so I'm recording from another computer. And I think that's happening to a lot of us as we're using the computer so much. All right, my amazing people. I'll be looking forward to seeing you at a Zoom meeting. Doop. And we'll conclude the amazing historic fiction true adventures of Joseph Gates and his balloon loft. See you tomorrow.